Hello guys, DH here and welcome back to Europe in Detail, where we are currently in the north of Portugal. At this point, City Skylines is basically a 3D modeler. 9 years of assets and mods has turned this game into pretty much whatever you want it to be. Building a big American city can be a lot of fun, but I think recreating these small little wee cute villages and the vibe that goes with them is pretty incredible. Europe in Detail has visited some really unique and cool places, and here in Portugal that's going to continue. Today the little town swells down the hillside considerably. So let's start today's episode with some terraforming. The terraforming around here reminds me much of when we were in Italy. The nearby land is really steep and mountainous, and it's been terraced so that, well, in Italy it was to create vines for wine. There was a lot of wine being made in the town, but in general the land's just been terraced and terraformed so that it's more workable for whatever's being planted. In game it took me ages to figure out which method to use, and I used a few that you'll see. And to make things a little bit more difficult, there's also like a cliffy or a little cliff section right at the very bottom where it meets where the cars park. And in the end I changed the method for doing this also. So you can see a couple of the methods that I've tried already. I tried to use the terraforming networks to try and make it sort of naturally terraced, but that was quite clumsy even with the narrowest network I could find. But now I've sort of used network walls with network surfaces to create these sort of false floors or surfaces that look like terraces, and these just give me more control. It's as simple as that really. I don't think they'd look as good as doing it with the terraforming, hence why I changed them out once again. Here I'm trying a combination of the mod procedural objects and Grey Flame's mossy rocks to see if I can make sort of more naturally looking terraces once again. And at first I thought I had nailed it. I was really stoked after I did a small section, so I did the whole lot and then just hated it. It didn't look any good from any angle. And at this point I was literally out of ideas, so I thought, bugger it, I'm just gonna leave it how it is and I'll move on to putting some trees in. These trees are pretty important because these are here in real life and they help us transition the area we've just worked on back out into the more natural landscape. So that gave me a little bit of time to think, and in the end I'm going to combine all three methods in one way or another. The combination of these three methods together should help make it look much more sort of natural and realistic. I found a more appropriate network wall as well, which has more of an earthy sort of a rocky tone to it, so I've switched that out. Now it's just a matter of getting all of these networks in, setting them all up properly, and then moving on to the final detailing. The idea with the detailing here is to make it look like it's being actively used to either grow fruit trees or food. So we want some crops to have small little strategically placed bushes to make it look like they're little wee lettuce plants or whatever, and some of them might be just dirt crops that are being turned over for a new type of fruit or vegetable. So in game I'm going to use some dirty decals. Some of them need to be changed to procedural objects to have them appear on the surface networks we've used. I'm going to use little wee bushes, and I'm also going to put some vines and some scrub in, just creeping up our walls here and there. The terrain here is some of the steepest in the whole town, and it poses a really difficult challenge. There's a cool little walking track that sort of juts off the main walkway that comes down this part and through to another part we're going to build in the next episode. But as that path sort of heads off or wanders off down the hill here, the village sort of spills down the hill with it. So I'm going to put some pedestrian paths in here, and these are going to give us the guidelines that we're going to work around. The architecture that we see in the town so far is not going to change too much, and anywhere that you see a sort of terracotta looking roof is going to be right where we see one in real life. Most of them in this town, Piodao, are the sort of black slate or charcoal colour, and we're also going to see a lot of really aged stone and some ruined stone buildings down this way as well. If I had to guess, I would say this is a really ancient part of the town. In terms of the detailing around here, I really need to place big retaining walls in and some surface networks before I can do anything. Some of these buildings look like they're hanging in mid-air, so the first job is to make them look like they don't. There's a really cool and interesting looking sort of cafe or restaurant here. I can't really tell exactly what it is, but I'm going to try and build that right tucked in the back here off the car park. We're also going to have some really narrow pedestrian pathways coming through some very cool little places, little back alleyways and things like that. But as you can see, everything I'm placing down here is that really aged looking schist stone or slate sort of stone. Not everything's perfect due to the workshop sort of having a limited number of things in there in regards to old stone, but we've certainly got enough to make this come to life and offer that really aged look. So in real life, the path running down here is some really old sort of slate stone. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything that was sort of bang on in the workshop, but I'm going to use a combination of two different things to make this. I'm going to use the stair set from Armesto and use procedural objects to turn it a little bit darker. And there's a Japanese creator, I don't know how to say their name properly, but there's a really nicely textured sort of a floor block, for a lack of a better term, that I'm going to use. These are going to be placed in as closely as I can to this pedestrian path running down here. I'm not going to turn this invisible because funky things happen with it. I do turn some parts of it invisible if I've got no other option. But if I can hide the path just underneath the surface of these props, then no harm done. Obviously, we don't want to see that pedestrian path, but any way to get rid of it visually will work for me. So another thing worth mentioning is there isn't as much detail in Portugal, or this part of Portugal, as we have seen in the rest of the series. And when I say detail, I mean things like little wee tables and planters and things like that. There's no flashy shop signs or anything like that anywhere. This is very much just a showcase of natural materials. The buildings and pathways are all made out of the same sort of stone. There's a lot of overgrowth everywhere, and that really becomes the focus in the end. And these pathways in particular become a real focal point, and it's really neat to see all the people moving through these areas when they're done. If you guys are wondering where all the awesome vanilla citizens have gone, I've swapped them out for one of Sven Berlin's much more realistic sort of looking citizens. It's been a very important part of the series that I animate all of these little towns and villages we build and get them running in real life, or in the game in real life I should say. Making all these towns and having them completely empty just wouldn't achieve the same vibe, I don't think. So at this point we've done a good chunk of that pathway, but there's still quite a lot to go, and before I can carry on with the rest of it, I need to extend the pedestrian path looking at the real Piodao on Google Earth. So let's do that and then carry on placing the buildings in. So now for the pretty tricky part. You heard me mention earlier about the stone surface that I had that I was going to cover the paths with, and this is what I'm doing now. This takes a long time and it's not really that fun, but it just looks so darn cool when it's done. I've punished myself with the same style pathways before when we were in Greece, but again it just really helps with that look. The flooring prop that I'm using here just looks so darn realistic as well. It's got little bits of grass coming up between the rocks. The stone looks weathered, and with procedural objects I can darken the colour and make it pretty perfect. So not only are we trying to cover that pedestrian path, but we're also trying to make it look like all of these buildings here have proper access. I'm going to put some cube services in these later on, and that's what's going to draw our pedestrians and citizens down these paths within game. I want them to have nice easy access to their front doors. I mentioned in the last episode about these blue doors being quite iconic for Piodao, and how maybe it was because of, similar to Greece, that was sort of a local mineral or a plant that was available that when mixed with water it made that colour. Turns out that was way off the mark. With a little more investigating, it turns out that there was a painter in the town who would only sell blue paint, so everybody's accessories like front doors and windowsills are all blue. Now that's really funny and quite strange, but he could have picked a worse colour than blue, right? So putting in these doors and then just finalising access to these buildings with balustrades and handrails where I need them is sort of the last port of call. And I gotta say, it's quite a relief, and it feels good to get this part of the town done because it's daunting being this steep, and this is by far the steepest part of the town. I know these areas take a lot of work, but I also know that they look awesome when they're finished. So with that, this part of the town is done, but we are not finished yet. We still have to extend this path a bit further and make some pretty cool old ruins down here which are here in real life. We're going to slip an entertainment cube in these eventually as well and turn it into a real life historical place. Well, we didn't get a lot built today guys, but we got a really difficult part of the town done anyway. In the next episode we're going to extend that pathway all the way down the hill to a really cool swimming spot. I'm also about ready to take some more suggestions from you guys in regards to new places to go in Europe. In any case, thank you guys for watching today. You could give me a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it, that really helps me out with the algorithm, and I hope to see you guys on the next episode of Europe in Detail. Take it easy, see you later.